all, I Nirmala Rawat welcome you to my YouTube channel Hari Sadhana 108. Thank you all for your support. Keep supporting me. In previous part, Soma narrated Ravan Vadh to Anasuya, her mother, and ascetics in her hut. Now moving on to chapter 17, the return of Ayodhya, part 1. My mother and I walked back to our cottage in silence. Neither of us wanted to eat, and so we decided to skip the evening refreshments offered by the hermitage. Exhausted by the emotions aroused by Soma's narrative, my mother went right to sleep. After turning and tossing for a few hours, I stepped outside to take in the night sky. So many questions had awakened in me during the day, and I thought perhaps the stars would guide me to the answers I sought. A crescent moon shone down, leaving enough darkness for the stars to display their brilliance. There seemed to be an infinite number of bright stars and faint ones, those in clusters and solitary ones. Did those stars, being so far from earth, know of our Maharani Sita? Did they witness her austerities, her struggles and triumphs? Did they come to support her, or were they silent observers? Did they love her as I did? As I gazed at them, I wondered who they were. My mind wandered to the women sages of whom Soma had spoken. Where were they now? Perhaps they were overseeing some of the stars and planets, relieving some distress far away. After all, their concerns could not be of our earth alone. Perhaps our Maharani was with them, tending to some important matter in another part of the universe. If that were so, how could my prayers reach to her? For as long as I could remember, my heart had always been filled with love for Maharani Sita. But meeting Soma opened in me a far deeper quality of love. Hidden in my heart was the desire to stay with Soma, to learn from her, to serve her. But I dared not mention this to her or to my mother, as I was destined for marriage, a destiny I now would accept. Listening to Soma had mysteriously broken some block in me, a resistance that arose from a source I couldn't identify. It didn't seem to matter what path my life took as long as the path brought me closer to Maharani Sita. I would be content. This was the only measurement that mattered to me now. Eventually, I laid my head down on the soft ground outside our cottage. I must have fallen asleep because I did not notice the dawn rays approaching. It was my mother's voice that awakened me. Anasuya, she called gently. I opened my eyes to find her seated beside me. Tomorrow we must begin our journey home. We have not had a chance yet to speak with Soma about your situation. It is not necessary, Ma. I hurried to inform her. I will do whatever Pitaji thinks is best. Such a change of heart, she replied with a smile. Soma's magic has already worked. I am glad. Now we must let her finish her narrative. After taking a small meal at the hermitage, we headed to Soma's hut, where she was resting upright in the same spot where we left her the evening before. My mother explained to her that we had to leave the next morning, and she nodded. What more can I tell you? She asked, turning to me. All of my questions of the previous night vanished, and I replied shyly. Can you share with us how it was when Maharani Sita returned to Ayodhya? How did she come to live in this place so far from the city? Ah, replied Soma with a smile. That is quite a long story and a complex one. It is difficult to convey what Mata's role was in the world, since so much of what she did lay hidden even to this day. But I will begin. Soma was quiet for what seemed like a long time. With closed eyes, she began to rock back and forth ever so slightly, and a slight hum sounding like an om emerged from her throat. I rested my back against the wall as I sat by Soma's side and closed my eyes as I listened to her narrative, seeing the images emerged in my mind's eye as she spoke. After Sri Ram and Mata left Lanka, their first stop was to offer prayers to Mahadev at the spot where Sri Ram had done puja to Mahadev and the army had built the bridge to Lanka. Then they went back to Panchavati where Mata and Sri Ram visited sage Chandrika. Mata had promised her that she would visit again, but she had been unable to do so because of the kidnapping. Now she kept her word. She was pleased to see Chandrika steady in her meditation and in a much better situation than when she had first met her. She was still living as a hermit in the same broken hut, spending all of her time in austerities. Mata told her that in a few years a son would come to her. How is that possible, Mata? She asked in amazement. You will find a small boy wandering in the forest. The one who abandoned you will now find himself abandoned by his mother. Take him in and raise him like a son. He will become your student and learn from you and grow very attached to you. There is much love in your heart that needs to find fulfillment. Shower it on him, as only your love can heal him of his past deeds. Chandrika's eyes filled with tears at these words. I will find him again? She asked in a gentle tone. Mata nodded. Only this time he will be much better behaved. You will set him on a course from which he will not stray. Sri Ram stood by and watched this interaction. When they were finished speaking, Sri Ram said, Chandrika, your prayers were a source of strength to Sita when she was in Lanka. For that I am ever grateful. Prabhu, she began to protest modestly, but Sri Ram and Mata smiled at her. Mata whispered to her, the recovery of your husband in the form of a son is the blessing of Ram. It was he who performed the last rites of your husband when he found him dead in the river, and it is he who is guiding him back to you. Raise your son to be the sage he was meant to be, said Sri Ram. After blessing her, they took their leave. Jai Sri Ram. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next part. Have a wonderful day. Jai Sri Ram.